Summer might be winding down, but there's still time to make it count. From now through August 31st, borrow $5,000 to $25,000 with rates as low as 8.7% APR. Planning your next adventure instead? Hit the road this fall with an RV loan starting at just 6.74% APR. Whether it's one last summer splash or the start of a new season of travel, Parda is here to help you make it happen.
Audible's romance collection has something to satisfy every side of you. When it comes to what kind of romance you're into, you don't have to choose just one. Fancy a dalliance with a duke, or maybe a steamy billionaire. You could find a book boyfriend in the city and another one tearing it up on the hockey field. And if nothing on this earth satisfies, you can always find love in another realm. Discover modern rom-coms from authors like Lily Chu and Ali Hazelwood, the latest romantasy series from Sarah J. Maas and Rebecca Yarros, plus Regency favorites like Bridgerton and Outlander. And of course, all the really steamy stuff. Your first great love story is free when you sign up for a free 30-day trial at audible.com/Wondery. That's audible.com/Wondery.
I'm Alice.
And I'm Brett.
And this is The Prosecutor's Legal Briefs.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to this episode of The Prosecutor's Legal Briefs. I'm Brett, and I'm not yet joined with Alice. We're not entirely sure if she's going to be showing up or not. She's in the middle of a business trip. We're hoping she'll make it back, but don't stop listening now because it's not just me. We have the one and only Kevin and Aine from the Murder Sheet. Not here to talk about the Murder Sheet today, but about their soon-to-be, I am sure, New York Times best-selling book on Delphi. They say I'm overselling it. I'm not. On the Delphi case, Shadow of the Bridge, the Delphi Murders, and the Dark Side of the American Heartland. Guys, welcome back. We're always happy to have you. So excited to talk about this book.
Thank you so much,
Thank you
Brett.
so much.
We were so thrilled to talk with you about it, too.
So I got to say, first of all, before we get into the substance of the book, I do want to say this because I think it's important to say. You guys sacrificed your health, your sleep, your sanity to cover this case, not only by standing in line at all hours of the night at the courthouse where this trial was going on, but also covering it from the very beginning to get the story. So I'm really glad that you guys are going to be the people to write the definitive work on this terrible crime and the fortunate fact that we ended up having justice in it. So I want to start off by saying, how did you guys, because I don't even know the answer to this question, how did you guys get started covering Delphi?
That is such a good question, Brett. And it's one of those things, I think a large part of it was, so Kevin and I got together. He moved to Brooklyn, New York to be with me. And then we were like, oh my gosh. And then the rent there is crazy. I love Brooklyn. Yeah. New York City is a great place, but it's tough to live there. So we decided to move to Indiana. And there were a number of things that happened. But one thing, when you're in Indiana and you're in true crime at the time and still to this day, Delphi is the thing that haunts people. And I think the reason for that partly is because people feel like they can relate to the girls. They feel like those could have been my daughters. Those could have been my sisters. That could have been me. And that story resonated with them.
And I'll be honest, up until that point, I think we started covering it in like 2020 or 2021. Up until that point, I'd resisted even following the story because it seemed really, really complicated. And I thought, how could I possibly ever catch up?
And Britt, you might have this too, but sometimes with Kevin, it's really interesting. And other lawyers that we speak to, sometimes there's like a level of, I'm perplexed that so many people are so obsessed with this case because they're like, this is just a horrible tragedy. It's really depressing, but they're not sure why it's necessarily. And for me, I think what this case represented was you had the relatability of these two kids who were just doing innocuous, normal stuff, going out and having a nice day after a fun sleepover. So you had that. And that was why a lot of people did follow. But I think the reason why this case really got wild online was because there was a sort of DIY, let's all solve the case together element because Libby captured the killer on video, and that ended up being such a crucial clue. But it also brought in some of this darkness where people were like, we're going to solve it, and then became like they took ownership of the case in their own minds, and that caused some problems later.
And this wasn't the first case that did that. I mean, there were other cases that had that, but there was something different about this one. And almost when it started and when it happened coincided so much with the boom in true crime media vis-a-vis podcast and YouTube and all of that sort of stuff. And we've seen sort of this cycle repeat, as you said, a case that for whatever reason really grabs people's attention. And then suddenly the dark side of all of this starts to come out, and you start to see the conspiracy theories and the sort of pointing fingers at random people and maybe not so random people. And as you were working on the book and trying to tell this story, how much of the book is dedicated to that phenomenon, the sort of true crime aspect of things?
Definitely.
Hello. Hi, guys. Sorry. I literally landed and ran here.
Oh my
Thank you
God.
so much.
Thank you for doing that. It's so nice
Thank
to
you for
see
being here. I literally ran from the airport like this. And I was like, Kevin, Anya here. I'm here. I'm so excited. I was like reading. I had the book pulled up on the airplane. People were like, what's that murder about? I was like, boy, do I need to tell you about this. Murders on the flight from DC. I'm just saying.
Thank you.
I just imagine you in like an action movie running.
That is how I run through the airport. This is accurate because there's no other way to do it. People think you look crazy, so they make way for you. You know, it's
That's true.
actually a travel hack.
Yes, you got to
Sure.
look a little intimidating.
That's another way that you don't get a victim of a crime. You look crazy, right?
That's right.
I mean, you guys are the heroes. Okay, I actually want to hear the answer to that story. Wait, let me just back up real quick. You wrote a book! And it's coming out, and we can pre-order it. Congratulations! This is like literally years in the making. So much work. It's one thing to report on it, another thing to put pen to paper and actually write a book about it. So, congratulations!
Thank you so much. That means a lot. And you guys are in the acknowledgement. So when you get it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna highlight that part.
But yeah, well, we so appreciated all your guys' support throughout this. It's been a crazy case. So I feel like we all kind of went through kind of a war together. I would say so. A lot of the book is dedicated to the true crime aspect. We kind of debated that, right? Because you don't want to like necessarily throw gasoline on something, but you also, I don't feel like the general public fully understands how bad this can get. I think sometimes when I hear like mainstream reporters talk about this, there's kind of like a laugh in their voice of like, oh, these guys, they're so nutty about true crime. And it's like, we're not talking about people who are like, you know, buying a like wine glass with some spicy serial killer thing. Like we're talking about people who are actively harassing victims' families for absolutely no reason and stalking people. So it's a lot more serious than I think it's kind of comes across sometimes.
And I think when you write about the case, you really have to cover that, if for no other reason than the fact that the defense attorneys in this case really cozied up to those people. And they use those people as part of their strategies. So if you ignore that part of it, then you are ignoring a crucial part of the defense team's own strategy.
You're whitewashing their strategy, frankly.
Well, you're saying long arm strategy, right? It wasn't me. It's like this. We actually have a legal term for this in like corporate structures, right? It's like you can pull back the curtain. If it's just like a straw man, if you're just utilizing something, you can't hide behind the fact that there's like so many degrees of Kevin Bacon.
Yes. And we felt it was just, and also that's part of the subtitle, the darkness in the heartland and frankly beyond the heartland. It's not just the fact that this investigation turned up other predators or other bad people or negative things. Like there is a darkness in the heart of humanity where sometimes I think certain people, and maybe part of this is in all of us, we want to hurt people who are already hurting, or we want it to be their fault so we don't have to feel bad for them, because it makes us uncomfortable when bad things happen to good people. And the story really does like look at the victims' families and sort of how they tried to be advocates for these girls and how they tried to raise awareness, and how at every turn there would be people supporting them and cheering them on and saying, yes, let's raise awareness, let's keep the story alive. And then there were these people who are coming in and saying, no, you're the villains, like I'm going to go after you. And it just got crazier from there.
And, you know, you guys have poured so much of your life into this case, and there had to be some temptation when the verdict came down to just say, you know what, we're going to close the book on this, no pun intended, and move on with our lives. What made you decide that it was important to write this book?
Well, I don't give us too much credit on that, Brett, because I think we already had signed a book deal at that point, right? Yeah. So we were kind of locked in at that point. I think the thing was that we did, there were several times we were just kind of like, I don't know, can we back off and like look at it from a higher level?
Yeah, covering the trial was enormously difficult. And there was certainly, it's probably not a secret, there were times during that process where we wanted to quit and just go home. And what stopped us from doing that, there were times we were in the car heading home, was we would hear coverage of the case from other sources. And they would be describing things in the courtroom that never happened. And they would really be slanting it. And it occurred to us that we owe it to the girls. We owe it to Libby and Abby to tell their story truthfully. And we just owe it to everybody just to make sure the actual facts get out. And that's what kept us going back to the courtroom day after day. And that is what ultimately made us want to write this book, because we owe it to them to tell the truth of what happened and not let their story get hijacked by the conspiracists.
I do want to add one thing. I saw one thing that was just always made me laugh, where people would be like, the murder sheets, trying to act like the prosecution is doing a good job because in their interest if there's a guilty verdict, because then they'll get a book deal. There was going to be a book no matter what. We would have written about it if there had been an acquittal. That was just our opinion, right? People don't really understand how publishing works. I'm just going to, that's been something.
It's a good story no matter what, truly. It's horrible to think of it that way, but I mean, I bet you there were documentaries in the making and they just left a hole for whatever the verdict was. It doesn't really matter, because unfortunately the facts of this case is like one of the most depraved set of facts you could possibly imagine. And we have always been drawn to these horrific types of facts. So yeah, I think you're exactly right about that. But I wanted to note something that you said, just in case, because I think it should be highlighted, just in case you guys don't toot your own horn. When they say they almost gave up at trial, it's because there were limited number of seats and there were no cameras inside. And it was just literally by waiting in line that you got in each day, each half of the day, in fact. And so there were times, I mean, they didn't sleep. They started lining up the night before. They ate on the go. It was freezing. It was no bathroom breaks, quite literally putting everything on the line just to be able to gain a seat, to be able, like you said, to have access to the justice system. And you're right about that. What we have learned in this new true crime world that I think you're documenting in your book is that when there is a vacuum of information, it will be filled. And if it's not you, your voice there, someone else will fill it. And we have seen what types of voices tend to fill that void, and they don't tend to be those rooted in evidence or facts.
And it's so true. And I just want to am I hallucinating? We talked to you guys in the car at one point.
You did.
We
more than once, I think.
More than once. But that was that kept us sane, honestly.
You were on the way at one point.
Yeah, we were on the way back. People, it's interesting. People kind of, we still get emails and they're like, whoa, you sound really different in your trial coverage. We were sleep deprived and sort of losing our minds slowly. Because also, it felt like we were, us and a small handful of people sort of we're analyzing it and had this background where we really knew the case and we were kind of talking about it. But when you talk to a lot of people who are kind of coming in and just going in cold, they wouldn't really always get it. And it wasn't malicious necessarily. It was just in some cases it was definitely malicious. In other cases, it was just I don't understand. Why is there no DNA? CSI effect stuff. So we kept on being are we misinterpreting things? Are we just losing it? Or is this what we think it is? And, ultimately, I think the verdict kind of spoke for itself. Yeah.
I think people got to see this in real time when you were doing it. But I think the parts of the questions that you didn't have answers to, you never made up answers to them, because when we talked, you would ask those questions to us. And I say that and you chuckle because you report with integrity. But I would see so much coverage, and I still see this, not just in this case, any case where someone's asked a question and it's clear they don't know the answer. And they just start talking as if they're the experts. And I'm like, you can stop and say, I don't actually know. Let's ask the expert, or let's ask somebody else. And so I will say that is really key to good coverage, is recognizing where you don't know the answers and not filling it with your own make-believe.
No, that's so true.
And, I think, not to bring up our most hated case, but the Karen Reed trial sort of exemplified this on the other side. In that trial, there was no one like you. There was no one who had credibility, who'd been on the ground, who'd been in the courtroom, who could say, hey, this stuff you're hearing that's reported, that's not accurate. This is completely insane. And everyone, it seemed like, he was covering that trial, was completely on board with the conspiracy and everything else. And you saw how that just continued to spiral in that case. And I truly believe that you guys were sort of standing in the breach because, we covered the trial through you. We would listen to you guys and we would read some reports too, but they were usually crap. And then we were able to talk about what was going on in the courtroom and why it was important and why it looked like it was heading towards a guilty verdict. And that's where it ended up. And I thought you guys did a really good job covering that.
This question actually goes back to the book. So you guys covered this case extensively before the trial. It captured international attention well before there was even, a suspect on the horizon. But you've been with this case really from the beginning. So you knew the facts forward and backward. You knew the theories. You read all the briefings. Did anything about your perception of the case, of the defendant, or of kind of the strength of the evidence change or shift by sitting through the trial? And did that shape how you wrote the book?
Yes, definitely.
I'll be very honest. When Richard Allen was arrested and they finally released the probable cause affidavit, I don't think in my reading of that, I fully appreciated how damning that was. I don't think I understood everything that implied and put out about the timeline. I didn't really understand how that put a real box around him. And so my initial impression was, well, the case may be not as strong as some people think. Certainly then over the course of the coverage, some of the pretrial stuff and watching some of the defense antics, I became convinced that the case was very, very strong. But I don't think it was really until it was really laid out in detail, the timeline during the course of the trial, that I fully appreciated that. And in fact, one of the prosecutors who came onto the case, I think about a year before the trial, James Luttrell, he also said, when I read the PCA, don't feel bad. I didn't see that either. Yeah,
you like, it's weird. Like reading it just on a piece of paper is different from seeing all the witnesses come in, all the timestamps of all the social media. But I think the prosecution did such an amazing job, and it's a credit to them and their performance. But it's also just about kind of being able to immerse yourself in the evidence at trial versus just kind of reading this quick thing that's just supposed to get probable cause. I would add to that, we were in the position where I think, over time we were, I think we started out maybe possibly because we were biased about the PCA, where our bias is going to be like more information. So we had a negative reaction to the PCA being sealed. We were pretty hard on prosecutor Nicholas McClelland for that one, which, at the time felt like that's fair game. But in retrospect, I understand that decision more. I mean, Stacey Diener and James Luttrell were just an incredible team. Like, it's not that I had a feeling that they weren't going to do a good job, but I was just blown away seeing them do this and piece this together. And I really felt like they gave the strongest presentation of this case. And it was very impressive to watch. So we probably had some doubts about McClelland at first, where we were kind of like, well, he's kind of young and, this is a huge murder case. And, he just, I think, blew away everyone's expectations for sure.
So along those same lines, as you're writing the book, I assume you're also learning new information, you're talking to people. How did your perspective of the case change as you're working through the book?
So this was fun, and not fun, really depressing, but interesting, and kind of it shows you, I think, the people behind it, because you kind of are getting to know the characters and the people who were the investigators and who were working on the case or who were close to the case or community members. But when we're talking about the investigators, there's all these people from different police agencies who worked on it extensively. And I'm pretty sure like almost all of them either teared up or actually like cried in interviews with us. Like, these people cared so deeply and put so much into this. The reason being their care for the girls and for justice and for the girls' families. And that was something where you're kind of like, you're always just sort of looking from a distance at these people and like, okay, they're coming in and they seem very professional and kind of stoic and whatever, but getting to know how much this meant to them and how much heart they put into it was kind of beautiful in a way.
One thing that was kind of strange about doing the book was, as you say, we'd covered the case for years and we'd seen these people in court on numerous occasions. We'd read filings, but the prosecution team really scrupulously obeyed the letter and the spirit of the gag order. So we never talked to them. We never had to sit down and had an interview or a conversation with them until after the gag order was lifted. in December of last year. So just getting to hear what they were thinking and what their plans were and their strategies, that was really fascinating and eye-opening.
I remember like this just gives you a sense of like the lack of interaction. Like, you know, I was always impressed with Stacey Diener in court. She just seemed very solid and put together and just like she was really on it. But like they're not going to talk to you. And I remember, not to put you on blast, Kevin, but Kevin knocked down all these stanchions at a pretrial hearing and wandered off, and I'm just standing there like, oh my God. And like I like lock eyes with Stacey Diener. I'm like, I'm sorry. Like, and so like, you know, it was nice to finally be able to talk to people, you know, and like actually get a sense of their perspectives in the case and not just see them as, you know, almost just these people who are almost just performing in front of you. It's like you're really getting to know what was in their heads and the emotions and all of that.
Throughout your coverage, and I assume in the book as well, you really bring the human element, not just of the victims and the witnesses, but also of the professionals who are part of this case, because you're right. Like, while we read books and watch movies and documentaries about these cases, it may seem like it's a predestined or pre-written script that everyone's just playing a part in. But in reality, these prosecutors, your emotion gets wrapped up in it. You don't know if this is the right choice or not. You don't know what's going to come out of that witness's mouth. You don't know what that person's feeling as the judge is yelling at them, or they get a bad ruling on a sidebar. I mean, these are all live things, and you're battling your own emotions, your own pride, your own uncertainty. Am I going to ruin justice for these girls? I mean, those are very real human emotions that I think a lot of people who imbibe in true crime forget, that this is not a script that we're playing parts in. This is not a play. We don't know what the ending is. And I think you guys do a really good job in your interviews of the professionals who have a part in this case to show the humanity of it all. And I think when people see that, you begin to understand a little bit more about how not everything's a police conspiracy, not everything's Odinism, not everything's X, Y, or Z. Like, we are all just humans doing our best to seek justice in an imperfect but the best system we have so far.
Absolutely.
Yeah, very well said.
So speaking of Odinism, so I assume you can't write a book about Delphi without talking about Odinism. And it's hard to talk about Odinism without laughing. You know, it's hard to present it in a serious way. How did you do that? How did you address that theory in a respectful way to the extent it deserves any respect whatsoever?
We talked about this in like tone, and like we don't want to come across as just dismissing anything, because right, you guys know this just from doing the work you've done for years. Sometimes weird stuff is the truth, and like dismissing something out of hand just because it's totally wild is not necessarily good or keeping an open mind. So, I mean, from the beginning with Odinism, even when it came up, I remember conversations with us where I feel like you guys were immediately very skeptical, and we were skeptical, but we were also trying to like, okay, but like maybe this, I don't know, like, why would they do this? I think in the book, we kind of just decided to just be very blunt and honest about how we saw things. And it's not so much that it has all the trappings of a terrible pulp novel from like the 1930s of like a cult in the woods sacrificing girls. It's also that they're just, when you actually scrutinize the evidence, there's nothing there. And that's where I fell apart. And I think it's kind of interesting. It's almost touted today as this sort of like, if only we'd had Odinism, we would have won the day. And like, my opinion is that the jury would have been back in 15 minutes with a guilty verdict. Like, I think it was a terrible theory. I think by not doing it, Judge Gull gave them a chance essentially. But I think we're pretty blunt about it in the book, because we don't want to whitewash things, and we don't want to like give anyone the benefit of the doubt when like it's just a sloppy bad theory.
And we talk about it, how it first came up, which is very early in the investigation. There were law enforcement officers who looked at it and wondered, you know, maybe there's something here. And we kind of follow them as they look at it, and they basically find there's nothing there. But they have these theories, and sometimes it's hard to let that go. People get emotionally connected to it.
Yeah, people really do get emotionally invested in things. And that's one thing in the book I think that's important. The difference between being truly like open-minded, whereas you don't care what the outcome is, but you want to follow the evidence to whatever outcome you're going to, versus trying to steer into an outcome that will make you feel emotionally satisfied and special and like you're the hero. And I think the people who were the core group of investigators were bound by the evidence. They were not bound by the sort of like, let me satiate my ego at all costs. Because if they were, there would have been other people who came up before where there would have been people like, okay, like they put in a lot of work on the Kleins, for example. So they were willing to throw all that away and look at where the evidence was pointing. Other people came in and it was like, no, I know in my heart it's this. And it's like, no one cares what your heart is saying. What does the crime scene say? What are the actual, evidence in the case say? And I just, I don't want people who are just acting out of emotion. And frankly, usually it's barely concealed ego. Sorry, that was a whole rant. I don't even know.
I think that's exactly right with with the barely concealed ego. So, you even speak literarily, which is so wonderful. I mean, so there are so many angles that this book can take with so much coverage, not only in podcasts and YouTube and people following this case closely. What do you hope your book brings to this case? Because I do think it's a voice that's very needed, but it's a different goal, I would think, than, say, your coverage during the trial in real time.
Yes.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy. Just drop in some details about yourself and see if you're eligible to save money when you bundle your home and auto policies. The process only takes minutes, and it could mean hundreds more in your pocket.
Visit Progressive.com after this episode to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
Coverage during trial is like you're almost like at a, going to like the World Series and reporting on every game and giving you, kind of perceptions and color from the immediate happenings.
I think it's kind of a bizarre thing. But this story it was covered extensively. But despite that, I think a lot of the story has never really been told. Because certainly in the early days of the investigation and up through the trial, there was a lot of secrecy about what was happening with the investigation. During the trial strategy, all that has never been told. And then when people follow it and these bits of information starts to come out, it's like you're looking at the score of like a football game as opposed to how is this football team put together? And so I think we tried in the book to give a bigger picture thing. Here's the parts of the story maybe you didn't know. Here's some parts of the story that maybe you forgot that maybe seem more relevant now in a different context.
Yeah, we wanted to treat it sort of like, in terms of just the style, like try to be a little bit novelistic and really just tell the story and let that play out, rigidly adhering to all the facts and whatnot. It's nonfiction, and we have multiple sources for different things, but certainly kind of just taking you through the story, because I think, if people have come up to us like, okay, how can I get started with the Delphi story? Do I want to be like, yeah, go back to the beginning of our coverage in 2020. Good luck. Like you can listen to two people have a nervous breakdown in real time. Like, or do I want to be like, this is something where all the important things are, kind of put in a way that can actually be understood and hopefully at least give people a better understanding of why the jury made the decision it did. Because a lot of people are still confused, and that's understandable given the media climate.
Let me ask you this, and obviously you don't have to give anything away because I want everybody to read it. But if you can give us a little bit, what was the most surprising thing that you learned in the process of writing the book?
For me, what's weird, because sometimes like when we learn stuff or, there's just stuff floating around, like we're not always very good at knowing how the public will react to things. Like sometimes what's surprising to us is just everyone else is like, okay, who cares? And then what's surprising, they're like, wait, what? And then like, sometimes I'm like, I feel like my news radar is broken because it always surprised me what people end up focusing so much on. For me, I guess maybe surprising is the wrong word, but we really got a lot in detail. And this is a disturbing thing in the book, frankly. It was disturbing to write and learn about, and I'm sure it'll be disturbing to read. But things about the crime scene and things about like there was always this perception that the cops bungled it and just did a terrible, like I didn't preserve evidence and just everything was a mess. And learning how meticulous those crime scene investigators were and how like much people went through this and how sometimes you can do everything right and you're still just not going to get a lot of usable forensic evidence. And maybe we need to be more acknowledging that, and that DNA is not always going to be the magic, like we're going to solve this immediately sort of thing. So I think it was surprising for me to kind of just learn more in depth about like, because I think just even going into trial, I always had that assumption of like, oh yeah, well, yeah, maybe there was some mistakes. No, I mean, they pretty much did a very by the book investigation, and it just didn't yield that much in terms of any usable DNA or offender DNA.
I think the extent of Alan's, for lack of a better word, his bad behavior in prison, it was portrayed as the fact that, oh, he's just acting up because he's not being treated well or what have you. If only he gets transferred to Cass County Jail, then glorious things will happen. The sun will come out, the rainbow will come out, and everything will be fine. And we'll see him for the healthy, normal man he is. And then he goes to Cass County. He's threatening guards. At one point, he does like a motion across his neck, like a slashing motion. And this is what's going to happen to you, guard, if you keep on acting like this. That was surprising.
I'll add one more thing. I will add one more thing that did surprise me. We went back and forth on this like throughout trial. Because one thing we'd always heard behind the scenes, like we have sources in these different Indiana communities and people give us stuff. And we'd always heard this defense team is very confident. They're going to win. And going into trial, we were kind of like, you would be very lucky to get a mistrial. That would be a big win. But like an acquittal, really? We always went back and forth on whether or not that was just, I don't know, a front to like seem confident, like, and like, put that out there, maybe manifest that, good outcome, but kind of ultimately phony, or if that was authentic and that they truly felt that they were going to win. Because that would speak to a level of like delusion in my mind, given the performance we saw. I think we kind of ended up finding out more information about like where that was and where that fell. And that was surprising to me.
Okay. We're just like, I feel like I'm asking you college essay questions because you know this case so well. Okay. So obviously you talk about these egos at play and all these people who have investments into this case who have actually no real professional role in the case. This case obviously was like, well, I don't know. Actually, you may have a different conclusion. Lightning in a bottle in terms of the mess that it became. Do you think if there was not the media frenzy aspect of it, whether good intentioned or bad intentioned, if this case would have been less sensational, I would say more justice for the victims as opposed to this like media circus? Or do you think this case was just destined to be on this path because of the defense attorneys at play or the facts at play or the defendant and what he does no matter what? I'm really curious to hear you say that because everyone keeps asking, why Delphi? Why did this case happen? So if you took out like the media element of it, do you think it would still have been the circus that it turned out to be?
I think for a great deal of the life of this case, the media kind of ceded ground to social media and the nuts. And the reason for this is because of the police during the course of their investigation, they weren't talking. So the media didn't have anything to report. People online could endlessly speculate. You could watch this video of Bridge Guy, the little 2-second clip, and you could zoom in and you say, oh, does he have puppies? Is he wearing a hat? Does he have a gun? What have you? And just you endlessly speculate. And then you start spreading rumors. Oh, I heard this or I heard that. And so I think by the time there was an arrest and there was a trial, the poison was so far in the system because of social media. If anything, I think social media then kind of egged the media as a whole on. What do you think?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would also say, I mean, these defense attorneys, I think, made it clear what their priorities were, and that is very apparent to anyone who read their filings and just read the kind of really outlandish language. They don't read like legal filings. They read like someone who's trying to talk to the media or public directly. And by trying it in the court of public opinion, instead of, typically you'd have parties to the case and attorneys trying to, make friends with the judge or doing things in a way that would be, kind of looked upon favorably by the court. And they just didn't seem to care about that. They just seemed to care about, like citing a YouTuber in their Frank's memorandum that should hang in the Louvre. I mean, just like the priorities were weird. And I think if this had gone to defense attorneys who weren't going to do something like that, it probably would have caused a lot less pandemonium. I think it probably we wouldn't have seen a leak of crime scene photos that are still floating out there and just the most disrespectful and horrible thing in the world.
And the YouTuber that they cited in that Frank's memorandum, he had made threatening comments about the prosecutor's children.
Yeah. Like, what are they doing? Like, like it was just like, I mean, their behavior in this is just some of the most baffling because you can understand like some guy in his basement screaming about, the case in between ranting about his ex-wife. That's somebody you can see doing wild stuff. But defense attorneys who seemingly had good reputations coming into this and the way they behaved and just the like the amount of balderdash that they kind of just ended up flinging out there at everybody was just shocking. I mean, we were watching it and we were just like, you're trying to give people the benefit of the doubt. You're trying to say like, maybe they have a reason for this, or maybe they're just so committed to it. But at a certain point, when you look at it all together, it's just like, I just still don't understand it.
Well, they were filming themselves the whole time.
Yes.
So there's that. I mean, I'm sure none of that was just a coincidence. They were just documenting that.
It was not for their video diary.
Yeah.
That's in the book that they were filming themselves. And I remember being like, I'm very certain about this. We have this from multiple sources.
It sounds crazy.
It sounds so really crazy. I almost took
vindicated.
It out.
You're
absolutely vindicated. Yeah. This is from Richard Allen. Oh, it's like, God.
Yeah.
I'm going to start saying that every time I do a dramatic click in front of just what a thing. Like,
it's for Murder Sheet. Here's my pre-order.
Like, I mean, you guys are attorneys. Like,
no, we don't do that.
No,
we don't
imagine doing that.
Not even a little bit.
Don't they realize like it's just like so corny and phony and weird, but it seems so sincerely felt on some level. And it's just like, do you not have a mirror? Do you not see how insane this looks to everybody?
It's funny because we talk about how good it is to have, you guys in the courtroom giving the other side. I don't feel like there was anybody, all they were getting was praise from those YouTubers and podcasters and alternative media people. And they they loved it. They ate it up, and they did more and more of that. And it wasn't effective. If you watch the Hulu documentary, one of them, I think it was Rosie, admitting that maybe the Franks motion wasn't the best way to convince a judge. Yeah. You think? I'm glad you're coming to this conclusion. You talked about a front that they were putting on, and did they really feel confident or not? Another, and this is sensitive because I feel some empathy for these people, but Richard Allen's family from the beginning, whether true or false, put forward this, I'm going to call it a front, that they supported him. They believed he was innocent. Obviously, Kathy Allen has continued to proclaim his innocence through tearful or maybe tearless sobs, depending on how you look at it. Did you learn anything in the process of writing your book that gave you insight into Richard Allen and his family?
I think, and to be clear, they wouldn't cooperate with us. So, I mean, the Hulu docuseries, it was very interesting to hear from her. Also a bit of a missed opportunity because I would have loved to have heard them ask her, hey, why did you seem so standoffish to him in this police video? And you were almost kind of shrinking from him and seemed very like skeptical towards what he's saying. But now suddenly you're convinced. Like, what was that journey like? It's not even a hostile question. It's just like, take us on your thought process almost. But people, still pay attention and people are looking from afar. I mean, one thing that came out was, at least in certain stores that he worked at, Allen was regarded as a creep towards women. I mean, he wasn't this like little shy, nice, perfect husband that's just the sweetest little Ricky in the world. I mean, he's like a creep, at least with some women. And then in other stores, seems fine. He's kind of a quiet boss. So it's just interesting that you're talking to different people and you're kind of getting different sides of him, which is always a bad sign, right? Like it's not like a static personality. Obviously, we're all different in different situations, but like to the point where you're kind of like, wow, like people were getting different sides, I think, based on what he thought he was getting away with. As far as his family, things we heard about was they were very close, the Allens, and they were married very young. But as far as just like what would explain like this level of what I see as denial on Kathy's part, it's hard to say. I've always been interested by the fact that Kathy has this initial reaction where she's like, you told me you weren't on the bridge that day. And he's saying, no, babe, remember? I did tell you that. And like, I know, you know me. If Kevin ever pulled this with me, I'm walking out of that Indiana State Police post. Like, that's a huge red flag, but she seems skeptical. She comes back and she's his biggest supporter. And she also comes back. And when he starts confessing to her, she's immediately saying, no, you're being poisoned. Where the heck did she get that? Because her mother-in-law, Janice Allen, was saying the same thing. Did someone tell them that? I don't know. I'm like legitimately asking, did someone tell them that? Did they just make that up? Like there just seemed to be some weird stuff. I mean, you can say like the attorneys came into the picture and then seemingly they became a lot more convinced. And she talks about in the docuseries being shocked about the outcome of the trial. She seems like she was being told.
I was going to say, that's not good lawyers, right? Like you, as a lawyer, what we tell our clients behind closed doors is very different than what you portray to the real world.
Absolutely.
But you got to prepare them. You're like 75% chance or 90% chance, in this case, guilty, right? You just got to prepare them. And it did not seem that they were prepared for what the evidence was clearly pointing towards.
Yeah.
they were this feedback loop, like you were talking about earlier, Brett, where everybody was telling them that they were great and they were believing it. And I think one of the keys to succeed in life is to have people in your life who will tell you when you are wrong. I'm very lucky to have Anya. She loves doing that.
It's my favorite activity. I'll say this, like one thing that kind of was a theme in the book, we didn't, do this on purpose and just what we observed, but everybody was doubting the prosecutor, Nicholas McClelland, and everybody was kind of like, okay, he's a young guy. Is he going to be able to do this? And like, let's see. And he just like kept bringing his A game and kept on like devoting so much more time and energy and work onto this case. And everyone's like praising the defense team and acting like they're the second coming of Clarence Darrow. And like, oh my gosh, like what a brilliant legal maneuver. And they're like falling on their faces. And they started becoming hostile, I think, to anything that was less than extremely positive. Whereas the prosecution was fueled by this idea of trying to get justice for the girls and trying to really bring their best game to the case. And it was just kind of an interesting thing where like they just seemed very fueled by different things.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if I could jump back a second. We were talking about things that surprised us. Nicholas McClelland, one of his big dreams in life is to become a judge. And at one point during the course of this investigation, he had a chance to become a judge. And he turned it down so he could stay with the case. And then a few months before trial, he had another chance to become a judge. And this time he decided, I want to do this. He goes to the families and he says, I really care a lot about this case, but I have to think about my future too. They give him their blessings. Go ahead. We understand. Take the judgeship. And he leaves and they are under the impression he's going to take the judgeship, until they see in the paper that no, he chose not to. He chose to stay with the case. And so that level of devotion, for lack of a better word, to seeing justice in this case, that was surprising to me. I wasn't expecting that.
No, I wasn't either.
Wow.
That's awesome.
And that's the thing, like going back to the humanizing all of these things, these are not just cases to the defense or the prosecution. At some point, especially a case of this magnitude and of this just tragedy, it becomes part of you. It is not just work. That's one of the hardest things about being a prosecutor or being a lawyer, is it's really hard to actually compartmentalize and separate your life from it. And you guys got to see that and I think draw that out as well, so that when you realize that about the attorneys in a case, you tend to have a little bit more grace in how you critique or view the entire case.
Definitely. I wish we had gotten, we note this in the book. We, despite being promised multiple times on multiple different occasions, the defense never spoke with us. They shut us out. They made it very clear that they wanted to do a whole publicity tour, mostly on YouTube, with outlets that would baby them. I do wish we'd gotten to hear from them because, I think it would have been nice to see the human element behind that as well, because I imagine they did really care. Do I think they did a good job? No. Do I think they were above board on a lot of this stuff?
No,
not at all. I think they did some really
I think that is a very gracious view of it. And I agree with you that they cared. But let me say this. Everyone cares about different things.
Yeah.
So I think they cared.
I think they deluded themselves into thinking that they were like Atticus Finch and that they were, and they built themselves up as heroes and they were making decisions on what would look the most heroic as far as poses, instead of thinking about what's going to actually help my client and get him the best outcome. I'm sure they deluded themselves into thinking, no, this is all for Richard or Ricky or whatever. But I think a lot of it, if they were being honest with themselves, but again, they're still human beings, would have loved to kind of get some of those insights from them, but they were just not willing to speak with us. And I think that's a shame. But at the same time, we're not going to just make stuff up or like whitewash it or pretend like it was all okay or chill, just because we were pretty blunt about how we saw their ultimate theory and their ultimate performance.
Well, in case you somehow missed it, the book we're talking about is Shadow of the Bridge, The Delphi Murders, and the Dark Side of the American Heartland. By the time you're hearing this on podcast world, the book will be out. So you don't even have to pre-order it. You can go get a copy. It's available in Kindle, hardcover, and audiobook, so you can listen to it, read it, however you want. So that's awesome. And
Are you guys going to do any sort of a book tour? Will you be in different cities that people can know about to come see you?
doing a tour all over Indiana. And that's pretty much
That's great.
We're definitely going all around Indiana. We're looking into maybe some neighboring states as well. We're going to Kentucky. But publishing, it's not, not necessarily going to get a full national book tour out of everything. But, there might be, we're going to be in Crime Con with you guys. So we're so excited. It's our first time. You guys are like the king and queen of Crime Con.
We're not at all.
I think they'll be selling it there at the bookstore. We've been told the bookstore. So we'll mostly be hanging awkwardly around our table. People want to swing by and have us sign it. Or if they just want to say hi, you don't have to buy the book. You can just say hello. And that'll be really exciting. But we're going to be there with you guys. And actually a lot of Delphi people, in terms of, I believe Nick McClellan's going to be there and the families of the girls. And
they're receiving the Crime Fighter of the Year award.
And with Lieutenant Jerry Holman. So they're all
awesome.
Well-deserved honor.
Well-deserved. All of them are heroes in my mind. Not because the investigators or the prosecutors did everything perfect at all times. There are no mistakes made. But what these people did that I think people should appreciate, we can't expect perfection from anybody because people are people. But these folks, these police investigators and this prosecution team never, ever gave up, and they gave it their all. And that, to me, when people say, oh, well, the police botched the crime, I understand why people say that. And frankly, in the beginning, we kind of assumed the same thing. We were like, small town police, they couldn't handle it. When you really look into it, there was an original sin of the case, which was too many people involved too quickly. And by the time they were able to get it under control in a management sense, it was too late. The crucial lead was buried. And I think that we focus a lot on that in the book, but certainly I don't think that means everybody is like collectively guilty of that error. And so I think we should be celebrating the fact that this investigative team never gave up and they gave it their all. And they cared so much about Abby and Libby that they did what they did. So we're really excited to be there and watch those panels and all of that.
Well, we are so proud of you guys. Thank you for taking time to talk to us about this book. We are all so excited. The link it will be posted everywhere. It's been in the chat. And let us know, once you read it. Tweet all your favorite local channels. Let's get them on TV. Let's get you talking about this because, like you said, there is definitely a vacuum out there when the right voices aren't talking about it. So I'm really glad that now we have a book version of what you saw and what you studied for so long to be able to tell the girls' story and tell all the team's story of how they were able to get justice in the end for Abby and Libby. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we sign off for today?
I thought one more surprising thing when
you're thinking of all
I love this. I love this.
A lot to answer questions, to think of answers. I didn't realize that when we go and we sit in front of our microphones and we talk about these cases, people will clip things out of those and send them to the people involved. So when we talk to a lot of the people involved in this case, they had heard lots of clips from your program. Lots of clips from our program, lots of clips from still other programs. So they're well aware if we say something critical or what have you. And they reminded us of something.
They reminded us of hey, remember when he said that? And I was like, oh, yeah. Oh, that was what?
But
what
episode? A lot of clips of the prosecutors being passed around, lots of clips of murder sheets.
You guys were very
remember that.
People would be telling us, yeah, I didn't listen to your episode last night, but the prosecutors, that was delightful. But people really appreciated your guys' amazing coverage too.
I didn't know people were listening.
We didn't know people were listening to us. We were like, yeah, we're just some randos. And then people would be like, it's the murder sheets. And we'd be like, oh no. I would just say, yeah, I would just want to say thank you again. Like, you guys really helped keep us sane throughout this process, and your coverage was terrific. And just the legal analysis and smarts you brought to this was very needed, and we appreciated it so much. A lot of other people did. And I would also just say, for me, we've had an outcome. We've had a verdict. Appeals are pending. There's always going to be appeals and whatnot. I think, though, that being said, for me, I hope what this book does, if it can do anything, is it helps reclaim the story for Abby and Libby, because Abby and Libby ultimately are the heroes of this situation. And if you ask anyone who worked on this case, they will say that. That's not just something McClellan brought out for the closing. That is something that is very much evident, because had they not gotten that video of Richard Allen on the bridge, that was such a cornerstone of this case. And so I want this book to reclaim the case for Libby and Abby, and perhaps not center as much the creep who killed them, because he really isn't very interesting. He's a sad little man who wanted to rape a woman or a girl that day. And he made a terrible choice that hurt so many people and it damaged so many lives. But these two girls accomplished more in their short lives than he ever did in his whole sad existence. And they're what should be remembered. Things like the scholarship funds in their names, or things like the park that's dedicated to them. That's a safe place for kids to play. That's what people should be focusing on. Their legacy, the friends that they left behind who are now growing up and starting their own families, and their loved ones who continue to sort of mourn them and miss them at every chance. Like, I think I want people to focus on them. Let's leave this guy to his own devices, and maybe, he can try to repent once more or whatever. But I think ultimately what's important are those girls. And I feel very strongly about that.
Well said.
And that's why the closing was so powerful, because it was true. And yeah. I appreciate you guys doing that with the book. And if that's the thing the book accomplishes, then wow, what a great book.
Thank you.
Absolutely. No, thank you guys. Thank you for that reminder as well. And for speaking truth through all of this. Now, I will say this case, I think, brought us together. I think we met through this case, but thankfully, this will not be the end of us being able to collaborate. And so, as sad as this case is, I'm really glad that it brought us together and we've been able to hear your insights through all of it. But thank you guys for being here. You guys have got to go order this book now. You're not going to want to miss out. I don't know, make enough noise on social media. Maybe they'll come to your state if you're not Indiana or Kentucky. We can make a lot of noise where we are as well. Thank you guys for your time, and we cannot wait for the nation, the world, to read this book. But until next time, I'm Alice.
And I'm Brett.
And I'm Anya.
And I'm Kevin.
And this is the Prosecutor's Legal Briefs. It was all mixed up. Hold on, I'm gonna turn it around. I literally ran here. My computer was like, "It's not ready." I'm like, "I'm ready."
You've barely missed anything. We found out their sort of origin story, and now I was asking them how much of the book is about the true crime phenomenon and all the conspiracy theories and that sort of thing.
I would love to know that. Wait. If you plug in your headphones, it makes it work.
Yes, sure. I'm glad you can hear me now.
I always hear everything you have to say. Hold on. Okay. I am online, you guys. I literally ran from the airport like this.
September, CBS hits are streaming free on Pluto TV.
I'm coming in hot.
For this month only, stream full episodes of Matlock.
I'm a lawyer, like the old TV show.
Fire Country, Elsbeth.
I do love a mystery.
NCIS Origins, Watson, and Ghosts.
What the hell?
This is the most amazing sight I've never seen.
All for free. The CBS shows you love, this month only on Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.